Welcome everyone to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. My name is Matt Baker. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode where we will be previewing this weekend's match between FC Dallas and St. Louis City, as well as going through a host of transfer window news and rumors. For our listeners on KTRS, we're going to run through the news because there's a lot of it. If you want a deeper dive on any of these players or news, though, download our podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your pods. If you're listening to us on our podcast, we're going to cover it all right here. But let's start off with the biggest news of the week by far. It is the signing of Fallou Fall, one of the rumored players that St. Louis had shown reported interest on. This was made official on Tuesday, July 15th. The club signed Senegalese defender Fallou Fall from Norwegian club Fredrikstad FK, and Fall will join on a permanent transfer occupying an international roster slot. Right now, it's pending the receipt of his visa and international transfer certificate, as well as the completion of his medical. He will be added to the roster as a U22 initiative player and is under contract through the 2028 season with a club option for 2029. Fall will be eligible to complete when MLS's secondary transfer window opens on July 24th. The receipt of his visa, his ITC, all of that stuff is his work permit. What that means is once that is complete, Fallou Fall will be able to practice and train with St. Louis City, even if it is ahead of the July 24th transfer window opening. And that's just a week away, less than a week if you're listening to us on match day. So this is rapidly approaching where Fallou Fall, once he gets his paperwork in order, will be available for St. Louis very quickly. The biggest thing to note also about Fall, or a big thing to note rather, is he's mid-season. His Norwegian club is currently playing. And so he sat out last week. He, like we talked about on Fallout, he said his goodbyes to his club previously. But this is an informed player coming. There's a lot of nuances that go into this. I'm going to read from Lutz's quote from the article before we dive into it later on. Fallou is a young line-breaking defender who brings the size, athleticism, and defensive instincts we value in our back line. At just 21 years old, he's still developing, but we believe his physical tools, technical ability, and mentality give him the foundation to grow into an important piece for our squad. He's someone who can help us this season, and even more importantly, be part of our long-term vision. Bringing in a player like Fallou reflects our approach to adding young talent and building a competitive team for both the now and the future. Fallou Fall is a tall defender, left-footed, primarily left-sided center back, 6'4". He's expected to make an almost immediate impact to St. Louis. And so there's a lot of excitement building around this player. That was the biggest news that broke this week, the signing of Fallou Fall. But there are other notes, other news relating to players that are important to know. And as we go into this weekend, into this match against FC Dallas, one of the players that has drawn the most attention on the entire roster is Haziel Orozco. Haziel Orozco is ineligible as of the end of this past week against Portland to feature in any more MLS games. Now, Thursday morning, it was reported by Tom Bogert that Haziel Orozco was being signed to a first-team deal. This is the big news, is that looking at our available roster slots after Fallou Fall was signed, we have one senior roster slot and two supplemental roster slots open. The reported signing of Haziel Orozco, and by the time you listen to this match day, maybe, the signing might be official. So this could be official as you're listening to it, but it may not be yet. The report of Orozco would be that he would be signed to our supplemental roster. If he is indeed signed, that leaves one senior and one supplemental roster slot open. He has used up both of his short-term loans in starts from City 2. So this is a player that David Critchley has gotten value out of in signing him, and in playing him, rather, to his short-term loans. Tom Bogert was the first on the reporting on Thursday, hearing from his sources, presumably at the league office. And so excitement continues to build around Orozco. And when I talked to David Critchley on Thursday at his press conference about this, he was a little coy. Again, it's just saying that he knows and he believes that Orozco can help this team now, but he's staying out of the whole roster mechanisms. He did not confirm nor deny that Orozco would be available for selection against FC Dallas. But if he is, it will be after he's announced as being signed. He is currently ineligible until he's officially signed to the roster for MLS. Couple other player notes that impact City in a financial way. Isak Jensen, you remember him? Remember Isak Jensen from 2023? An 18, 19-year-old U22 initiative player, I believe our first ever U22 initiative player signed, who was sold to Denmark, was again sold. And so we are actually the beneficiaries now of a sell-on clause for Isak Jensen. A good bit of business, as Isak Jensen's loan to purchase option was triggered from St. Louis, initially sending him to Viborg in May 2024. And as part of that, at the time, Lutz Pfannenstiel said, in soccer, 10% is standard, and everything you have above 10% is pretty good, speaking about the sell-on clauses. So we have Isak Jensen now making a new move from Viborg to Alkmaar in the Eredivisie in the Netherlands. With this move, it's reported that Isak Jensen was sold for around 4 million euros. If you take 15% of 4 million euros, you're looking at $700,000. If you take 20% of 4 million euros, you're looking at $920,000. This is a significant chunk of money that we are getting from Isak Jensen, and that is great business considering Isak Jensen only appeared in, I believe, 23 MLS matches, averaging about 23 matches for the team in all competitions, with most of his minutes being in the US Open Cup. And he averaged around, I believe, 22 minutes per game. He really didn't feature much for St. Louis. He was loaned over to Viborg before he had a meaningful role in that 2023 season. And it's hard to really judge the move of Isak Jensen at the time as opposed to playing him for an extended period, because we were succeeding in 2023. We didn't need to give our 18, 19-year-old players minutes at that time because of how well we were doing. So Isak Jensen netting St. Louis a hefty sum as a sell-on clause for his transfer. Another player who may not be netting St. Louis as much, but it's probably going to result in some money or some GAM going to St. Louis, Aziel Jackson. Aziel Jackson, it was announced on Thursday, was sold from Columbus to Jagiellona Białystok. And I'm sure I'm butchering that name, so apologies, but it's Polish. He was sold to a team in Poland. City should receive a sell-on clause. There was one announced or reported when he was initially sold from St. Louis to Columbus, and the sell-on clause kicks in when you're sold outside of MLS. So that's why this was important for Aziel Jackson. All we've heard on this one so far regarding a transfer fee or the like is from our friend Manuel Veth from Transfermarkt, who just said there isn't much of a fee. So obviously, it sounds like this isn't as lucrative as the Isak Jensen sale, but it's still something noteworthy for AZ Jackson. Moving on to things that actually affect St. Louis City. Talked about this earlier in the week. Santi and I talked about it on Fallout last week. The rumors have been swirling about St. Louis acquiring two players from Minnesota United FC. Reported again by Tom Bogert first that St. Louis was acquiring 24-year-old forward Song Bin Jong in a cash for trade deal, and 22-year-old defender Devin Paddleford on loan. Paddleford being the tweener between Minnesota United 2 and Minnesota, and Song Bin being the U22 initiative player. Former Wolverhampton Wanderer, made 84 appearances for Minnesota, but has been on the outs since the managerial shift between Adrian Heath and Eric Ramsey after Song Bin had come to Minnesota. This move, if this move comes to fruition, now on the heels of the Fallou Fall official signing and the reported Haziel Orozco signing to the supplemental roster, if this move with Minnesota comes to fruition, St. Louis becomes full up on our roster. That is full on the senior side, full on the supplemental side. The only way we would be able to sign additional players after that time is by selling an existing player or transferring a player, moving a player off of the roster somehow. What this also does, between this report with Minnesota and especially the Fallou Fall signing, is it kind of puts the kibosh on a lot of other transfers that St. Louis had been working on, between Vojan Serafimovic, 19-year-old Serbian left-footed center back, Teodoro Sebastian Ars, the 25-year-old Paraguayan winger. All of these things aren't so much on the forefront, given the advancements in both the signing of Fallou Fall as well as the advancements in what Tom Bogert is reporting with the deal from Minnesota United. At the time, Bogert had said on July 13th, St. Louis City are finalizing deals to acquire Song Bin and Devin Paddleford from Minnesota United. So it seems like it had reached the league office. This would probably negate the need to bring in a winger. You have Song Bin, who is a forward, and obviously Fallou Fall takes care of your left-footed center back. Again, the transfer window opens on July 24th. Any players signed ahead of time, pending their work permit and paperwork being taken care of, or if they're a domestic transfer, they can train with City. So if we hear of deals made official before the end of the weekend, and it is for the Minnesota United players, or potentially Fallou Fall may be in St. Louis to train next week if his paperwork is complete, that's what we're waiting on, is the paperwork and the deals. They can train with St. Louis, and that's going to be exciting to watch just as much as waiting for the window to open, where Minnesota United is actually the first team that we'll be playing once that transfer window opens. So the floodgates will open at that time. Before we get into our preview, two more notes. One of them on Mekhi Joyner. Now, if you've been following me on social media, you've seen a back and forth. If you read the article that Tom Timmerman had in the Post Dispatch about Mekhi Joyner, there is, I believe, a discrepancy in what is understood to be occurring with the off-roster homegrown designation. I did my due diligence on this one, following up with the team two separate times, hearing from multiple sources and receiving direct confirmation from the club, as they understand it from MLS now, that Mekhi Joyner does have one more match he can appear in on a short-term loan. This being the off-roster homegrown designation that earns you 6 appearances in an MLS regular season match. And the league does not count U.S. Open Cup appearances in that because you get an unlimited number of non-league match appearances. And you also have to appear in a game to actually count for that, not just receive a short-term call-up, because Joyner has received 6 short-term call-ups for MLS matches already. He has appeared in 5 of those matches, including some really short appearances under Olaf Melberg, which is just frustrating given the scarcity of what this means. But Mekhi Joyner should have one more short-term loan available before we have to consider his own future, or whether he remains with City 2 in that off-roster designation for the rest of the season, or if they use this last supplemental roster slot after Haziel Orozco to bring up Joyner. That's all we know as of now. The last thing before we get into the preview of the FC Dallas match is a special shout out to City Academy Edison Niles, City Academy's own Edison Niles. He's a U15 player, and he just won the MLS Next 24-25 season MVP award. Niles notched 31 goals for City's U15 side, helping them to the MLS Next semifinals this season, where he had a goal in that match, and earlier this year in the spring earned his first ever call-up to the U.S. Youth National Team U.S. U15 training camp. So massive congratulations to Edison Niles, and a continued spotlight on the quality rising in the St. Louis City Academy. Before we transition into our preview of FC Dallas, let's circle back real quick. Let's talk about what some of these transfers mean. And I know you're probably here for the preview mostly, but there's some really interesting nuances in what I think a lot of these transfers mean. And this is for the podcast only. This one you're not going to get on the radio. Fallou Fall. I want to go back to Fallou Fall because Fallou Fall is the answer to our backline need. Fallou Fall, what this means for City now and in the future, like Lutz Pfannenstiel said, and the quote that I read earlier on, this being a move that can help them now and in the future. Let's look at what Fallou Fall actually offers as a player. He's been described as a strong, fast, aggressive, and accurate tackler, good at 1v1 duels, strong awareness to anticipate passes and crosses, and seen as a smart player who does not take unnecessary risks. I mentioned earlier, he's 6'4". He's versatile. He can play the left center back role or a left back role itself. And when I talked to David Critchley right after the signing on Tuesday, he really reinforced a lot of this. He talked about how they project him as a left center back in that 4-man back line, but he can play in the wide areas. He's good in spaces, the 1v1 capabilities. So he could help at left back if they needed him to, but they're projecting him as a left-sided center back. This is important on a couple levels, because if you remember way back when in 2022, one of the first signings to St. Louis City SC was Joachim Nilsson. He was our only, and has been our only and main left-footed center back, and was our first backline signee back in 2022. He was part of building out that spine. Klaus, Leuven, Nilsson, they were the top to back with Berkey spine of City. From day one, Lutz has prioritized a left-footed center back as part of this build, but he's never consistently had that. We've talked a lot, and you guys know this listening to Flyover Footy, the issues and injuries that we've had on the back line, the rotations we've had in center back, needing to use Kyle Hebert and Josh Yarrow, even Chris Durkin as a spot center back start. It's been insane. The amount of turnover and rotation we've had to have on our back line because of our center backs is ridiculous. But it all should have been, in an ideal world, anchored by Joachim Nilsson, a left-footed, proven center back. So from a stature, from a scouting report perspective, from what they would bring to City, on paper, Fallou Fall is essentially your Joachim Nilsson replacement. He fills that left-footed center back role in this build. He signed through 2028. The rumored transfer fee that we paid for Fallou Fall, as reported by Transfermarkt, is 3 million euros. This puts them right neck and neck with what we paid for Klaus, and it's being called the second most expensive transfer in the history of St. Louis City SC to Klaus. arguable currency conversions at different times, whether it actually was more in that. All we know is this is a massive deal with a huge investment to a position that we had prioritized so heavily early on to profile in this exact way. So the other piece of this is this also does seem like it could be an acknowledgement of needing to move on from Joachim Nilsson, to understand that he should have been, and this profile is what we wanted to be as a foundation, and it's just not working with his contract up at the end of 2026. His future is unknown, but it does seem like an acknowledgement of moving on from Joachim Nilsson, at least in the profile of what we want to have as our left-sided center back. It also reinforces both Lutz's and the club's preference and need to have a consistent top quality left-footed center back as part of this build. That's why I think Fallou Fall is so noteworthy, in addition to just how he profiles. It's also important to note, along with the transfer fee that we paid, the valuation of Fallou Fall has grown very rapidly. Just 1 year ago, June 2024, he had a 100,000 euro valuation, market value on Transfermarkt, and it has soared to 2.8 million euros. We paid about 3 million euros in the transfer fee, so pretty spot on to his valuation. But you, in just a year, that is a massive growth of how you project and value a player. And he's helped his current side in Norway win the Norwegian Cup by featuring regularly for Fredrikstad. Reportedly, also, this is a big one, drawing interest from multiple teams in Europe's top 5 countries. Specifically, Fall was reportedly courted by Werder Bremen in Germany and Union Saint-Gilloise in Belgium. After, and I know Belgium's not a top 5 country, but these quality of teams in these countries. Rapid ascent at French side Stade de Reims in his most recent stop at Fredrikstad. So he came through the Stade de Reims 2 team, and that's where he was loaned to Fredrikstad. The most recent moves for Fallou Fall are pretty fascinating. He only arrived at Fredrikstad earlier this past season, and he wasn't officially signed because he was on loan to Fredrikstad with a purchase option. He wasn't actually officially signed until less than a week ago, or maybe a week ago, depending on when you're listening to this. And that was for a 500,000 euro purchase option on the loan. Fredrikstad was they had a steal in Fallou Fall. This wasn't Lutz overpaying so much as it was Fredrikstad got in while the getting was good. They created this loan with a purchase option when Fallou Fall's valuation was on the rise, and his role at Fredrikstad caused him, while he was on loan, it caused him to be valued that high. Fredrikstad just did a good bit of business and a good bit of development on Fallou Fall as a player, and they are reaping the benefits by now having this turnover and recouping plus a ton their investment into Fallou Fall. Now, like I mentioned, he's eligible to train once his work permit is sorted out. Won't be eligible to appear in a match again until Minnesota United on July 26th. But he hasn't started appearing in training yet. As of Thursday, July 17th, we're not there yet. Still working through the paperwork. Plenty more on Fallou Fall once we can actually talk to him, once he's in training, once we see what he's like. But just a ton of excitement. Even on Transfermarkt, if you look at the article that they wrote, what sort of player is Fallou Fall? They've said, quote, industry insiders have compared Fall with Bayer Leverkusen center back Edmund Tapsoba. Athletic, extremely explosive. Fall was one of the standout young players in Norway this season, the entire country. That comparison to a 26-year-old with a 35 million euro valuation in Edmund Tapsoba, there's a lot of excitement. Again, I cannot emphasize this enough in this being the cornerstone signing, I think, of this summer. You've got Song Bin who might come in, but I think Fallou Fall, in what he means to the back line, shoring that up, the profile he offers now and in the future through 28, 29. The U22 piece of this is massive. He's only going to hit the salary cap at $200,000. Whereas he was, signed for 3 million euros on top of whatever his actual yearly, weekly salary is going to be. $200,000 is his cap hit, and that's going to be secured in this key left-footed center back role for years to come. Massive piece of business by Lutz Venestiel on this one. The other big news of signing Haziel Roscoe, it's important, it's good, but it's not on the scale of Fallou Fall. Like, we have to be honest with ourselves about what this actually means for City to sign Fall. I expect him to immediately slot in to at least push Timo Baumgartel and Henry Kessler for starting roles. If everybody's healthy, I could easily see an ideal starting 11 that has Fallou Fall and Henry Kessler as your backline. And it also raises questions, and I do think this is too early to go too deep into, but it does raise questions about Henry Kessler's own future. And it reminds me of last season with Tim Parker when his contract was when we were negotiating with Tim Parker and his $1 million+ contract, he wasn't coming down to an acceptable level for St. Louis. They didn't want to pay him that much. Henry Kessler's on $1 million+ contract as well. Not that Fallou Fall's profile replaces Kessler, because they don't. It's not exactly like Kessler for Parker in that that improvement or change. But I think this throws into doubt some of these higher dollar contracts. Timo Baumgartel under contract, I believe, until 2026. He's making significantly less. So questions to be had in the way that the roster is being constructed. But depth is always a good thing. At center back, we know that's always a good thing. So having Kessler, Baumgartel, and Fall now as your 3 top choice center backs for 2 center back roles potentially, not a bad thing. And you also have JGR, who's performed well at center back lately and is still trying to cement his own role. So the dark horse candidate is JGR and Fall as your 2 center backs. There are options that St. Louis has now as players are starting to round back into health. Timo Baumgartel himself returned to training. I'll touch on that in a minute. But a lot of excitement. Henry Kessler, not there yet. But Fallou Fall, whenever he arrives, what I'm getting at is expect him to slot in and help this club as soon as he's fit and acclimated to the system that we have. And he's earned the trust of the staff to put him in there. Orozco is already starting left back material right now. Right now on this roster, it's arguable that we don't have an out and out left back, because Orozco is obviously more that center back, defensive minded left back who's still good on ball. But his placement in the supplemental roster slot pushes Jay Reed even more. And so that competition will be there. And I guess it depends on when this becomes official. If he's going to be available for the FC Dallas match, Orozco, that's the biggest question I have for him. Songbin and Devin Paddleford, we talked a lot about this one. I don't need to go too much more in depth on this, but it is worth knowing that Songbin has his green card. He's a Korean international. Or he was a Korean international, but he has his green card. He acquired that in June of this year. This would be kind of a really well-timed move given his green card acquisition. So he would not occupy an international roster slot, just a U22. So that's good news for Songbin. That's kind of the only other really in the weeds thing that we haven't already covered on Songbin. That's good to know. So we're going to be monitoring this Minnesota United deal, as reported by Tom Bogert, a little more in the next week. Beyond that, Mekhi Joyner is kind of the one to watch. And it seems like with the signing of Orozco, the rumor of Paddleford, I don't know if this was a either or option like we had with Fall and some of the other center backs like Serafimovic, the 19-year-old Serbian youth international that I mentioned earlier. I don't think we're in the market for him. We're definitely not in the market for Michael Gurgel, the 19-year-old left-footed left back from the Polish 19-year-old left-footed left back. Those deals, because we signed Falu Fall, I think they're on the back burner. They're not going to happen. We're not going to sign multiple U22 defenders left-footed to those massive deals. Fallou Fall was the guy. And then this kind of goes to show, though, when you're hearing these rumors of like-minded or similarly profiled players leading up to the transfer window, you're getting an insight into the big board. How it's not you need to have all these players that we're hearing rumors on, but all these players that we're rumored interested in, they create the profile of who we really want to bring in. And we talked about this. This is the reason why we said the profile of these players is more important than the actual player itself at that stage of the game. Knowing that we're interested in Fall, in Gurgel, in Serafimovic, that profiles a specific type of defender, and it seems like we got him. So fantastic news for St. Louis City SC. You're listening to Flavor Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. Thank you so much for joining us. And now it's time to dive into our preview of FC Dallas. Before we get into the actual match, let's look at the history between these two clubs, because it's an interesting one. They are 2-1-2 against each other, with 2 wins, 1 loss, and 2 draws. I'm sorry, 2 wins, 2 losses, 1 draw each, including their last match played during Leagues Cup last year. It's been a back and forth contest. Last year at Leagues Cup in 2024, St. Louis won 2-1. In MLS play, they've traded blows. FC Dallas won the infamous first match, which, if you don't remember this back in 2023, this was the abbreviated match that St. Louis had to travel back to Dallas for and restart after about the 50th, 55th minute. In the it is the only game in St. Louis City SC history where there is no substitutes recorded in a match. That was the one in 2023 that is recorded as being played in June, even though it started in May. That two-parter was won by FC Dallas 2-0. City then won in August 2023, 2-1. There was a 0-0 draw in April 2024, a 2-0 Dallas win in June 2024, and then St. Louis won in Leagues Cup. So if history holds, the win-loss, draw, win-loss, now we're at a draw. So if history holds on that sequence, we'd be at a draw this weekend. Pure happenstance if that happens. I may be predicting a draw. We don't know, but it's not because this sequence. That's just something funny. Now, looking at FC Dallas coming into this match, a little more pertinent to this matchup. FC Dallas comes into this match in 13th place in the West, a 5-10-7 record on 22 points in 22 matches with 29 goals scored, 41 goals against, and a minus 12 goal differential. They are really bad at home. 1-7-2 record at home, well below their record on the road. This is a team that is a bizarro MLS team in how bad they are at home versus on the road. And they're not great on the road. Don't get me wrong. It's still a losing record, but they're terrible at home so far. Their last three matches, a 2-2 draw at San Jose midweek on Wednesday. So they just played, and they'll have 3 days rest as St. Louis comes in. Before that, a 2-0 loss at LAFC last weekend, and then a 2-1 loss against Minnesota United at home the weekend before that. Dallas fans are frustrated. This team has had multiple winless streaks this year, and they are currently on one as well. They are currently on a 5-match winless streak, and they had a 6-match winless streak right before their June 12th win at Sporting KC. So 6-match winless, defeated Sporting KC, 5-match winless. That's what FC Dallas is coming into this matchup as their form. They've only had one win streak back in March of 2 games. Sounds familiar, just like St. Louis. In 3 of their 5 matches during this winless streak, their recent 5-match winless streak, in 3 of those 5 matches, they've scored 2 goals. So while they've had 8 of their 22 matches goalless over the season, they've also shown themselves capable of scoring multiple goals, even as they allow more. This is a team that we'll talk about how they are in the beginning portions of the game coming back, but they tend to score goals. They just allow a whole lot more goals. Also in this 5-match winless streak, Dallas has allowed greater than 2 expected goals in 4 of the 5 matches, and the only one lower was San Jose on Wednesday, allowing 1.29. So 1.29 and 4 games of greater than 2 expected goals, where teams usually outperform their expected goals regularly on a per game basis. That's a really bad defense. We think St. Louis had it rough. Dallas currently has it rough in their defense. They've been porous defensively, to say the least, in the recent form, but they've also lost points from winning positions in 3 of these last 5. So defensively, yes, but also they have not been good at seeing out wins, seeing out their leads to the end of the game. Again, sound familiar? Going up first in 2, coming back to take the lead once, that's how 3 of their last 5 have been. So they've had opportunities, they've had winning positions, they just haven't been able to keep them. Health and availability has been a concern for Dallas, and it was a concern midweek. Some of their out players are pretty key, crucial players like Anderson Julio, Paxton Pomykal, Pedrino, and they missed Lucho Acosta on Wednesday, but though that wasn't injury related. Anderson Julio, one of their key players, is going to be out with a lower leg injury. I would say likely out. He missed the last 4 games or so, but has recently flipped in the past few weeks between questionable and out. His status is uncertain. He's a goal-scoring threat. So Anderson Julio is a name to watch for when that availability report comes out. Nolan Norris was out with an ankle injury as well. Not as massive of a component for Dallas, but Paxton Pomykal, their midfielder, out with a knee bruise. And Pomykal has been one of those players with a persistent knee issue. If you remember last season, Paxton Pomykal underwent season-ending knee surgery in April of 2024, addressing cartilage damage in his left knee. He was expected to take 9 to 12 months to recover. He returned to play just over a year later, 13 months later, on May 10th, 2025. But he's out now with a knee bruise that he suffered in the past couple of weeks. So really frustrating turn of events for Paxton Pomykal, and his, I would say, understudy, or the Ostrak to his Leuven, if you will, is Pedrino. Now, Pedrino missed Wednesday's game not due to injury, but assumed personal reasons. So there's a lot of uncertainty whether Pedrino, who would replace Paxton Pomykal in the midfield is going to be available to play. That'll be an interesting 1-2 punch to see if they show up on the out list as well, Paxton Pomykal and Pedrino, because that will massively affect the stability and the quality of the midfield for FC Dallas. Lucho Acosta was the only other player who showed up on the injury report this past midweek, but he'll be back. He was just suspended due to yellow card accumulation. No concerns about us facing Lucho Acosta for better or for worse. Or for better or for worse. Now, on that front, Lucho Acosta is the key player to watch. Lucho Acosta and Peter Musa. Acosta, their number 10, has 5 goals and 1 assist in 20 matches. Peter Musa has 9 goals and 4 assists. He's their number 9. He leads the team in both goals and assists. Musa scored a brace on Wednesday against San Jose, jumping his goals scored up from 7 to 9. Both Lucho and Musa are designated players, and both lead Dallas in key passes as well. So they are the focal points of the attack. The offense will run through these two players. Musa has 41 key passes that lead directly to a shot, and Acosta has 19. Now, for context, Marcel Hartl has 67. Conrad Vollum has 21, and Klaus has 16. Those are the 3 leading key pass players for St. Louis. Musa with 41 and Acosta with 19. No slouches on their own end. But this is why David Critchley on Thursday at the press conference said that the big players are going to be the key thing to focus. They cannot lose sight of Lucho Acosta. He called him out by name, talking about the youth of the back line that St. Louis will have coming into this and how important it's going to be to make sure not to lose sight of them. Other important players for Dallas are, like I mentioned, Anderson Julio, 4 goals, 1 assist on the year, and Shaq Moore, a name that a lot of people are going to find familiar from U.S. men's national team duties as their right back. Shaq Moore, talk about his stats here in a little bit on what he can offer, but he's going to be a name to watch and a player to watch as well. Some of the biggest storylines for FC Dallas coming into this, fixture congestion. They had their midweek match coming into this with 3 days rest. How much rotation are they going to have on this one, especially with the fitness of Peter Musa? Musa's fitness is going to be probably one of the most key things to watch, but Lucho Acosta is going to be rested. He could go the full 90 easily, and that's going to be a problem for St. Louis. Defensive struggles. Dallas has allowed the second most goals in the Western Conference, tied with Sporting KC and 2 fewer than the Galaxy. Just a mess defensively. On the St. Louis side, as you're listening to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS, St. Louis comes into this 14th in the West at a 4-12-6 record on 18 points in 22 matches. So because of this 4-point difference, the best St. Louis can hope for in this match, picking up 3 points, is to be 1 point back of FC Dallas, still in 14th. So St. Louis will end this next matchup in 14th as well, even if they're closer. On the season, St. Louis has 23 goals scored, 35 goals against, minus 12 goal differential. And as bad as Dallas is at home, that 1-7-2 record or so, St. Louis is about that bad on the road. 1-8-2 total away. Same goal differential and near same record as St. Louis for their home form, or for their away form as Dallas's home form. St. Louis is 2-4-1 under David Critchley. The last few matches, we know him. 2-1 win against Portland. That was fantastic, wasn't it? And then a loss against Houston, 1-0, and a 4-2 loss at home to Orlando midweek prior. Some of the things that we're monitoring for St. Louis is that we are still only 3 points ahead of the Galaxy and CF Montreal in the East for the Wooden Spoon, that last place in the Supporter Shield. Even with Toronto, we are even with Toronto. 6 of our 9 highest expected goal matches of the entire year have been during Critchley's tenure. Critchley, so his 7 matches, 6 of those matches have been 6 of our 9 highest XG matches. Very, very much turnaround in the offense, in the attack. The team is 2-4-1 under Critch, but they've had the advantage in expected goals against in 4 of those matches. So what does that mean? St. Louis has been doing a much better job under David Critchley of the high-octane offense, putting opportunities on net and in and around net, and they've done a better job comparatively at preventing the chances against them. If you have a positive XGA in 4 of your 7 matches, where under Olaf it was basically the exact opposite, you're doing something right. And you do something right over and over, you're going to be rewarded for it, like Critchley was against Portland. Now, defensively, this past weekend was the best statistical performance against Portland since Critchley's first game against San Jose. So using this game as momentum is absolutely vital. St. Louis also showed that they can win when they concede first. This past game was the first match in which they conceded first and then came from behind to win. They're 1-9-0 with 9 losses when conceding first this year. They have 9 goals scored from set pieces, but both goals last week were scored in the run of play. So while we talked last week about set pieces being not only key but absolutely vital, St. Louis showed that they're no slouch when they're in form with scoring in the run of play. Marcel Hartl obviously being the hero of that match. It's just the second time for City this year that they've scored 2 goals in the run of play. The first obviously being that LA Galaxy 3-goal outburst. Health and availability for St. Louis. Henry Kessler is out. Joachim Nilsson is out. Alfredo Morales will be out, and Chris Durkin likely will be out. Kessler was jogging around the field on Tuesday, indoor training on Thursday. Joachim Nilsson was absent. I think he was doing some indoor training on Thursday. Alfredo Morales was doing some short work, some small things on a training field on Tuesday, and was not in the small portion of training that I was at on Thursday. And Chris Durkin was sprinting on a training field on Tuesday while using a sled machine on a side field on Thursday. However, the good news for St. Louis, Timo Baumgartl should be back and available. Baumgartl returned to training with the team on Tuesday and had a full week of training as well. Critchley said on Thursday he would be talking with Timo on Thursday afternoon to assess how much he'd be able to go, starting, going at least 45, less than that, etc. So while Baumgartl will be available and he will travel, whether he starts or can do at least 45, that's what's up in the air. Critchley did say, though, if furthering the good news, that Edu Leuven would be available he would be available and would travel with the team. That is as of Thursday's press conference. The previous hamstring injury would not be a thing preventing Leuven from traveling or playing. I will leave it at that. So the big storylines to follow for St. Louis, to me, some of them are, will Leuven be able to travel? Yes. How much will he be able to go? Hopefully 45. He went around 20 minutes or so, considering stoppage time last week. We hope to see him at least 45. And if history holds from last week, Critchley said if Leuven can go at least 45, he will start. That's what we look forward to in the midfield. The left back spot is another question. So again, as we release this pod, Jaziel Orozco has not officially been signed, but the reports from Tom Bogert are that he has, and it will be announced. As long as that's the case, we expect Orozco to continue his left back duties. But it could also be Jay Reed, depending on who's had a better week in training. Just the overwhelming positivity and the compliments from Critchley this week on Orozco just leads me to believe that it's his left back spot until something starts going wrong with the team. You're riding this good wave of how your formation was with Jaziel Orozco in this modified 3-2-5 in possession, where you have Orozco and your 2 center backs as your defenders. You push Thomas Totland so high. That's value that Orozco can provide. That's stability back there to let us get numbers in the attack in that way. In that regard, I think left back is Orozco's until like I said, something goes wrong. Happy with our attack from last week enough to keep it consistent. So talking about Klaus, Toyshirt, Hartl, and in that group, so Salio is a question mark as well. Can tolerate the from his I would say shoulder injury. He's one player I didn't mention on the availability report, but he could show up as questionable. He could even be out, honestly. The thing about Salio is he doesn't have a sling. That was something I noted on Tuesday. He's walking around very free. Critchley told us on Salio that it's the pain tolerance. There is no structural damage to Salio's shoulder. That is fantastic news. Right now, it's all about pain tolerance and how much he can tolerate in being able to go. That's the question for Salio. So knowing that we were pretty happy with our attack, will we keep that consistent? Is Salio even able to go? That's a big question mark. That's a storyline to follow. Can St. Louis finally win back-to-back matches for the second time this year and win their second road match? That's what it all boils down to. 3 points. And we have to do it on the road. We'll be making it back-to-back. Can we actually get that off of our shoulders and be able to have another winning streak started? Now let's dive into a little bit more tactically about these teams and look at FC Dallas in particular. You're listening to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. Now, both teams prefer a 4-2-3-1 formation. For FC Dallas, Lucho Acosta is obviously the central playmaker. Underneath Peter Musa, they'll utilize a double pivot, potentially Ramiro and Patrickson Delgado. Basically, it enables Acosta to roam. Think about what Marcel Hartl does when you have those 2 central midfielders who provide stability. It opens up Hartl to move up and down and be so involved in the attacking third. That's what Acosta is. That's what Lucho Acosta's role in this offense is. FC Dallas, though, emphasizes counterattacking soccer. It targets Lucho Acosta's creativity and Peter Musa's finishing as cornerstones of their attack, but they are a counterattacking based team. Some weaknesses to FC Dallas's game have been a slow start to games where they've had difficulty imposing themselves early on. Primarily, it's argued that it's due to injury issues preventing or prevalent on their back line and in their midfield areas. I mentioned Paxton Pomykal. They've had injury issues with Leo Chu. They haven't really replaced Nkosi Tafari, if you remember that name from last season, who was sent to LAFC. So what this means to me is that an aggressive, high-pressing team like St. Louis has a strong chance of taking advantage of a team like FC Dallas, especially early on. The way we were able to dictate against Portland can be a blueprint, but it's a little bit of a different team that we're going to see in Dallas. St. Louis has the opportunity, based on Dallas's early match struggles, to really dictate the pace of play and to get one early on Dallas. Dallas has also struggled mightily on set pieces and set piece defending, another area St. Louis is strong in. So this is another advantage that St. Louis looks to capitalize on, are set pieces and dead ball plays. Defensively, Dallas is compact. So I mentioned their struggles defensively, but what do they actually look like while they're struggling? Well, they're compact. They will drop into a mid to low block. And I can already hear St. Louis fans groaning and grumbling because of how we were unable to break that down early in the season. Critchley is very aware of this. I asked him directly, and he said the key to this one is not going to be he didn't say the key was getting between the lines. He basically said the key is to push them back, pin them back, and then find space in front of goal, as opposed to against Portland, where the goal was to get in behind the lines. So it's gonna be a different look, and it's gonna be interesting to see how much St. Louis is able to have success in trying to pin them back towards goal, whether it's 4, 5, or 6 in the box near goal, and then create space. So we could be in store for some longer shot opportunities, for some of those twisting shots, the curling shots from the corners of the 18-yard box. It'll be interesting to see how they approach this Dallas mid to low block. Dallas is quality and rapid transitions from defense to their attack. They will leverage Lucho Acosta's creativity, look to get him into space and have him open things up a whole lot. They want to exploit spaces left by their opponents. And when they're able to generate turnovers from their mid to low block, they will attack fast. They are one of the lowest possession-based teams, as I'll mention in a minute, but their goal isn't to possess, isn't to own field tilt. It is to strike quick. It is to defend and strike quick from that. They have been resilient, though. So I mentioned that they've lost points from winning positions. They have also earned 16 of their 22 points from losing positions. So they've had this mental toughness. They've had this ability to shift momentum late in games, and it is primarily, not to beat a dead horse, Lucho Acosta and Peter Musa. Lucho Acosta has come in so clutch, and Peter Musa has a goal-scoring instinct that rivals Klaus in his recent form. But the team has struggled at the beginning of these games. The opening 20 or 30 minutes is a problem for Dallas. They struggled early in last week against LAFC when they lost 2-0. Costly goals early. Dallas loves their moments of transition. They will use one-touch passing to move the ball from defense to their offense and the attack. And like I said, it all goes through Lucho Acosta. They've got homegrown talents like that Pedrino I mentioned earlier, Diego Garcia, Anthony Ramirez. These are names to keep in mind because they will inject dynamism. Their inexperience, though, may lead to opportunities from St. Louis's veteran players. Strengths and weaknesses of Dallas, I've touched on some, but their counterattacking threat, individual skill, and midfield versatility, if they have quality like Pedrino or Paxton Pomykal, I don't think he'll be able to go, but those types of players, Ramiro in his place, those are 3 areas of strength from Dallas. Weaknesses, though, set piece defending, the slow starts, and their injuries and defensive susceptibility because of their youth. In that regard, St. Louis and Dallas are alike in the youth of their back line, because we're likely going to see JGR and Jaziel Orozco potentially on our back line, in addition to maybe Timo Baumgartel, maybe Josh Yaros, and that veteran presence. But the youth aspect is going to be there for both teams on the back line. That's going to be a story to follow as well. Both of these teams are, I would say, struggling to score goals. Dallas has 27 goals scored by their players. St. Louis has 22. If we compare the goals scored to their non-penalty expected goals, which is that XG metric in the run of play, non-penalty, Dallas is right on track. So they've scored 27, and they have a minus 0.3 difference in their NPXG versus their actual goals scored. St. Louis, though, so where Dallas is like whatever they're creating, they're scoring at a pretty consistent level. St. Louis is vastly underperforming their expected goals. And this has been a story all season. They can't rise above this. They started in a really deep hole with this number, and they haven't been able to really improve it. So what this means is St. Louis may have an XG of 2 in any given game, but they're still underperforming that. They're not getting over the XG, like I mentioned earlier, like most teams do on a game-to-game basis. A minus 8.5 difference, second worst in the league. So they might not be generating much, but their finishing is still really, really lacking. In fact, though, St. Louis under Critchley, I mentioned some of these stats about 6 of 9 matches, 6 of their 9 highest XG matches have come under Critchley. St. Louis, believe it or not, guys, St. Louis is actually 13th in non-penalty expected goals in all of MLS now. Top half. St. Louis is in the top half of all MLS teams in non-penalty expected goals, in what they're creating, the chances, the opportunities that they're generating in their attack. Dallas is 19th in MLS. But if you flip this to actual goals scored, the thing that matters, because I hear this on social media and I can already hear everybody thinking non-penalty expected goals, great in theory, doesn't win us games. In actual goals scored, Dallas is 19th. So they match their position in non-penalty expected goals. But where St. Louis falters is they go from 13th in that expected goals down to 24th in actual goals scored. Massive disparity. St. Louis has been trying to correct it, and they've been getting better under David Critchley. But in this regard, for better or for worse, they're still underperforming. Their expected goals, their non-penalty expected goals, it's consistently above 2, but they're not able to consistently score above 2 goals per game yet. So subpar attack, but really good creation. And they've gotten themselves to a really respectable point in overall creation. Now they got to get the finishing to match it. How these teams line up in what they want to do in progressing and possession. Average possession for FC Dallas, and this is where I go back to their just being a counterattacking team almost purely. Dallas is the second lowest in average possession in Major League Soccer with 43.9% possession. St. Louis is fourth lowest, 45.5% average possession. This is a game where neither team historically has wanted or cared to possess the ball too much. And I look for that to be kind of a hallmark of this, where there's going to be a little bit of a dogfight in who doesn't want the ball as often. But if you think about how St. Louis under David Critchley has tried to operate, being very overt on their desire to play better with the ball, to win the field tilt battle, as Critchley said, it could be St. Louis that says, all right, give us the ball. We're going to beat you. But how are these teams able to progress the ball? The progression on top of the possession goes like this. Progressive carries, which are carries of greater than 10 yards forward or into the penalty area. Dallas and St. Louis both average 14.6 progressive carries per 90. That's tied for 22nd. So neither team is quality at numerous progressive carries, dribbling the ball large amounts towards the opponent's goal. Progressive passes, passing the ball greater than 10 yards forward towards the opponent's goal or a pass into the penalty area. Dallas averages 33.8, St. Louis averages 31.9 per 90. That's 25th and 27th, respectively. So neither team really leverages the progressive passes as well. So we're not progressively carrying the ball with consistency. We're not progressively passing. What are we going to see in this game if that's not how we're going to play? Well, neither team moves the ball well in these longer actions via the medium to long passes vertically on the ground or the numerous carries. So I would expect a lot of aerial duels, short movements, some horizontal passing to open things up, your occasional flair by guys like Lucho, Marcel Hartl, Conrad Wallum, Tomas Ostrak. But I expect a lot of short passes. I expect a lot of give and goes. And I expect a lot of long balls that try to win aerial duels and then retain possession off of guys like Musa or Klaus. Mention field tilt, the last big stat that I want to get into. Field tilt determined by passes into and within the final third, how much time is spent in your opposing team's final third, basically. The last 5 matches gives you an indication of where each team is. The last 5, FC Dallas went from 41%, 29%, 65%, 37%, and 31%. Against Minnesota United, that was the 65%. Minnesota United is the only team with a lower average possession than Dallas. Every other Dallas match in the last 5 has been less than 50% field tilt. They just don't want to control the ball for a large amount of time. They don't want to have voluminous work in the attacking third. Whereas St. Louis, 5 matches ago up till now, was 53, 43, 32, 54, 55. The last 2 matches, they've won field tilt. And they're looking to do that again. I have no doubt. So I would not be surprised at all if St. Louis continues to win the field tilt battle. If we continue to see multiple sequences in this game over and over and over, where St. Louis has the ball in Dallas's attacking third. The frustrating thing will be, can they break down the low block by Dallas? And this is my number one question is, can they and how will they handle a team that wants the ball less than they do? For context on how familiar St. Louis is with teams that play like this is by far the lowest possession team that Critchley has faced. Orlando City was the next lowest in average possession. They came into the match and they outpossessed City 54-46. So low possession by City in a team that was still wanting the ball. St. Louis has really not played this type of a team under David Critchley. The problem that I see in carrying the way that they progress the ball against Portland, and I mentioned this earlier on, this goes into how do they break down the low block. The problem with building off their effort against Portland is Portland didn't want St. Louis to do that. St. Louis just took the game. They dictated it. They won that battle. FC Dallas is going to welcome the possession by St. Louis. Portland challenged us in the midfield, and so we worked through their lines. We worked in between and through their lines, got in behind their lines. FC Dallas will welcome the possession. They'll absorb it all, and they'll try to turn it over in their defensive third. That leads to a counter. That's a different approach, and it's stymied St. Louis in the past. It's going to be a massive story to see if St. Louis can break down this low block. Can City be as clinically effective in progressing the ball as they were last week? Well, David Critchley mentioned the benefits of Tomas Ostrak. He talked to us on Thursday. There's a lot of excitement in using Tomas Ostrak in this role in the midfield, and my starting 11 reflects that. City also needs to win the set piece battle and score at least one goal off of set pieces. I think that's how you take the pressure off of breaking down the low block, is you generate these free kick opportunities, these corner kicks. You're aggressive in the final third, and you draw fouls, you create corners, and you score off of these corner kicks. Personnel questions that could reshape the 11 in a major way. Leuven's travel availability, Salio's health. We think Leuven should be good to go. I mentioned earlier that Critchley said as of now, as of Thursday, he's good to go. He will travel. Salio, we just don't know the pain tolerance, so that's another point. And the left back role, a lot of other things. These two things really, Leuven and Salio, have a cascade effect that I'll talk about in a minute. And the last point, control Shaq Moore. Haven't talked about him a little bit. The right back for FC Dallas. Control Shaq Moore and prevent him from carrying the ball on the right. He is second on the team in progressive carries to Lucho Acosta. So it's not a massive thing that they do, but if Shaq Moore gets space, he will take it and he will progress the ball up himself. And that's something that our left side is going to have to manage. That's something that whoever plays that left midfield role, one of our central midfielders, you have to engage Shaq Moore. Peter Musa is the Klaus-like player who likes to hold up play, get the ball in front, or be a ball hawk in the box. He will play off of and play for others. Dangerous in multiple ways. City has to be aware of both of these players, Lucho Acosta and Peter Musa, in the attacking third of Dallas. If they lose either one of them, it could be one of those moments that changes everything. My predicted starting 11 as we round into the last portion of this show. My predicted starting 11 reflects a consistency from last week, but an insertion of one key player, Edu Leuven. Roman Berkey, Haziel Orozco, Josh Yarrow, JGR, Thomas Totland, that's my backline and my goalie, Tomas Ostrak and Edu Leuven in the midfield. My attacking on the left, Conrad Wallem, Marcel Hartl attacking central midfielder, Cedric Toyshirt attacking right mid, and Klaus up top. So this leaves a bench of like Ben Lunt, Simon Betcher, Jean de Silva, Salio Pompeu, if he's healthy enough to go, Kyle Hebert, Timo Baumgartel, Jay Reed, Joey Zielinski, and it leaves off at this point Michael Wenzel. So this provides Haziel Orozco actually signs his contract before the game starts. That's an obvious requirement. It also provides for Edu Leuven being 45 minutes fit. I am erring on the side of caution regarding Salio, whether he can appear off as a sub or not. I would rather be cautious with him on that with his pain tolerance. And Conrad Wallem at the end of the game proved just fine moving up into central midfield when Edu Leuven subbed off. Now, I don't have a problem with that at all. And I think Cedric Toyshirt had a really strong game last week that I would really like to build off of, see if he can continue finding space to try to break down that low block. Betting-wise, Dallas is heavily favored. FC Dallas is a plus 105. It's a plus 270 to draw and a plus 230 favoring St. Louis as of the recording of this pod end of the week. My score prediction, 2-2 draw. I think this is a match that Dallas is going to allow goals. St. Louis, their away record just doesn't instill confidence. I think they can take a point, but I'm not there yet on all three on the road. But it would just be such a boost to the fan base if we actually accomplish that. That's it for me on Flyover Footy. Thank you so much for listening to us as we preview FC Dallas and our huge roundup of the transfers and signings that we had. If you've liked what you've listened to so far, please tell your friends, have folks download, and if you want to leave a review or a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, that'd be fantastic as well. That's the way to help us. Now, we don't ask you to pay anything. That's the way to help us. We really appreciate it. It helps us do what we do and spend time as well. Thank you again for tuning in. Enjoy the game, FC Dallas against St. Louis City. And as always, go City.